Sharks explore with their mouth, so they are curious that way and they get a lot of information through a bite. Not all birds are truly monogamous. Some are just seasonally monogamous. Some are whatever they want, and no one's gonna judge them, right? It's okay. So the wise old owl comes from the fact that they can live into their 60s. That is a very long-lived bird, and I don't think everybody should have pets. It takes a certain amount of course, responsibility and education to properly care for an animal, especially one that's gonna live into their 40s or 50s, like these guys. We're hoping to teach people to respect animals in their own space too, their backyard, their school playground, etc., and not harm the animals that they see.
My guest today is a true friend of the animal kingdom. With over 20 years of care for creatures great and small, her passion for animals has been the driving force of her life's work. From her formative professional years as a zookeeper and animal trainer at the San Antonio Zoo, the Dallas Zoo, SeaWorld, and the Texas State Aquarium, she has accumulated a wealth of knowledge for all of our animal friends. Today, she continues her mission in a unique way, spearheading a beloved mobile zoo that brings the enchantment of the animal world directly to you. Please help me in welcoming my friend, Amanda Winter. Hey, Amanda.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm so happy to be here. It's a lot of fun.
Tell us about these little guys that we have here in our hands.
Well, you, in your hands, almost handcuffing you, you've got Prince, and he's a ball python. And his special coloration is called pastave, which is a fancy coloration you'll see in captive ball pythons. But there's many different morphs of those guys. But they're originally from Africa. That's where they come from in the wild.
Okay, and how did they get here to us?
Over years of desire for people to have them for pets, that's how they have come over here. But now they're mostly captive bred, so they're really not imported anymore. When I was in the trade a few years back, they still were being imported. So that's a pretty recent update to that particular species. But there's many species, of course, in the pet trade, which is something that we're actually combating to educate people on. But this guy here, this is David boa. He's a Colombian boa constrictor. So this is a similar type of snake. They're both constrictors, right? But this would be an African python. Pythons are from the Old World, and this is a New World species. So boa constrictors are from the Americas for the most part.
Okay, so what is it that you're combating? What was it
So when I say combating, I'm talking about maybe misknowledge or misinformation about animals. And then we were talking about conservation, right? So educating people on animal conservation, such as importation of species for pets. It's not necessarily something we want to be doing anymore to an extent.
So most people go to a zoo, right? They'll go to the San Antonio Zoo or the Dallas Zoo, like you said, and they'll go there and you'll see these animals, but your zoo brings animals to people. I don't see that a lot.
Yeah.
So what is it that these animal encounters, what does that entail?
So it could be all sorts of different scenarios, and every time we go somewhere it's different, which is a really fun part about the job that I enjoy. It's different every day, which is a lot of fun, and its own special challenge, of course. But what I love the most is it's accessible to anyone. So even if somebody can't travel to a zoo, or maybe they have already seen the zoo and they just want something new, or maybe they are a little overwhelmed with going to new places and stuff like that, we can actually bring the animals to their home, to their classroom, whatever it may be. And I think we can actually reach people a little bit better in their own space where they feel comfortable. And my main reason for opening up a mobile zoo in the first place has to do with my passion from a long time ago, which is teaching people about misunderstood animals like snakes. Snakes have always been my favorite type of animal since I was a little kid, and my mom would have me like look at them and research them in the yard and make sure that we had safe snakes in the yard, and she would let me catch them, which is kind of crazy, but my mom didn't want them in the yard, so she knew that I wasn't afraid, so I would actually chase them and grab them and learn about them and things like that. So I've always liked misunderstood animals, spiders, snakes, and the best way to help people understand them is to bring them to them, or at least give them an experience, even if it is at a zoo, that can happen there too, where it's more hands-on, more personal. Maybe they have names, maybe they get to know facts about the animal that they didn't know, and to understand that they're just animals. They're not monsters, they're not scary, they're here for a reason. And we're hoping to teach kids and adults too, because it's for anyone, right? We're hoping to teach people to respect animals in their own space too, their backyard, their school playground, etc., and not harm the animals that they see.
So as you can see, like you, I love snakes.
I can see that.
And I actually had
cool.
a ball python when I was in high school.
Oh, cool.
And my mom was afraid to come into my bedroom once I got it. And had I had known that, maybe I would have got a snake earlier.
Yes.
Keep the parents out of the room.
Yeah, right. That's a whole deterrent, right?
But that being said, You talk about misunderstood animals.
Yes.
Why do you think a lot of people are afraid of snakes?
There could be a plethora of reasons. It could be something that they heard from their parents or grandparents, that every snake wants to attack you and the only good snake is a dead snake, and those are all awful things to say. Could be movies, could be something they read that's misinformation. I think it's more word of mouth, though. I think humans tell other humans how to act. They act scared, and so other humans copy them, especially children. Children are really impressionable when they're young. I have a fear of roaches. I'm afraid of flying roaches. And so I remember on a playground situation where there was a bunch of them in a tree stump that we were playing nearby, and they all started crawling out and flying at us. And I think that's where my fear of roaches comes from in the first place. And nobody told me to not be afraid. They just let it happen. You know, it's like, oh, that's normal. Just run and scream, you know, instead of explaining to me like, hey, those roaches were probably really scared and trying to get away, and somebody messed with their home. So they're just trying to, you know, get out and run away or fly away. I think that a lot of times too, people may have an experience in their, you know, in the woods or somewhere where it's a little bit out of their control, where they see a snake trying to strike at them, and we don't think about, or maybe not everybody, but some people don't think about like, oh, that snake is just afraid of you. It's trying to scare you away so that you just leave it alone. And that's what we always recommend with, you know, people seeing wildlife in your backyard. We don't expect or recommend for you to pick up a wild snake. That's not a good idea at all. We recommend to leave them alone, and they'll leave you alone. Maybe take a picture of it, and that's about it. Just let them, just respect the snake. But I think it comes from, it's very complicated. And it's a whole therapy session.
And correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
But there's probably very few, if any, animals that are just trying to attack humans for the sake of attacking them.
Very few, except if they're our natural predator, like a tiger or even a bear trying to protect its young.
But that's protection like versus like you see these movies, like for instance, Anaconda, and the snake is just trying to kill everything, or like Jaws,
sharks,
where they're just there they're killing machines, just trying to kill everything. And that's really not the truth, because there's very few shark attacks.
Correct.
To begin with. Most of the time it's a shark mistaking a surfer for a seal or things like that. They're not just attacking for the sake of attacking.
Or they're just curious.
They're just curious.
Sharks explore with their mouth, so they are curious that way, and they get a lot of information through a bite.
So tell me a little bit more about these guys.
Yeah, no worries.
They're both males, is that correct?
They are both males. Okay, it is a little hard to tell on snakes, but trust me, they're both boys.
So
they're actually around the same age. They're just different species, so one is bigger than the other. Prince is a male ball python, which is smaller than a female, and the same actually goes for most constrictors, like the boa constrictor that I'm holding too, David. Females are larger. They're often twice as big, and that's because they have to carry the young. They have the babies, of course, so they need some extra weight on their body to survive after giving birth or laying eggs.
And how many eggs do they lay at once?
So for a ball python, they can have anywhere from 1 to 2 to like a dozen eggs at a time.
Oh, wow.
And their eggs are pretty large. They're about the size of a chicken egg, just elongated, but they're leathery. They're not hard shelled. They're soft shelled, almost like a sea turtle. I don't know if you ever had experience with a sea turtle egg. It's a little bit harder than a snake egg, but it's still more of a leathery texture than a chicken egg, for example. But these guys give live birth. So the mother for a boa constrictor of any species, all boas are like this, they give live birth. So they're actually going to be gravid or pregnant longer than most snakes. And instead of laying eggs, their babies are live born. And did you know that vipers are like that too? Like rattlesnakes. And these guys can have like 60 young at a time. Yeah.
Wow. Is that why, you hear the stories of places like Florida where there is incredible invasion?
They think the main reason, though, is not really released pets, although that does happen and it's a terrible thing. Most of the time, released pets will not make it. But what actually happens is they have a lot of hurricanes. So breeding facilities, sometimes the buildings will become destroyed, and then animals escape, which is kind of like the next step that happens if the building's not too destroyed and they're, they haven't died from the storm. But what happens a lot of times is the building's destroyed, and then if there's animals that are babies, those are going to have a lot easier of a chance to kind of like do their wild instinct, basically. So basically it's the same type of environment that they would have in Burma, which is where they're from, in Asia, right? But in South Florida, it's very humid, it rains a lot, it's very jungly in comparison to North Florida. So it's really in South Florida and the Everglades. But what happened, they think, the going theory nowadays is that we're not putting too much blame on those random owners that let their snakes go, because that's not really enough to cause enough of a problem. What they really think was it's hurricane related.
Oh, wow.
So buildings get destroyed, Baby animals escape.
Okay.
They're running on instinct. Baby animals are a lot more defensive than adult animals that have been in human care for a long time. Those guys are a little more spoiled. They don't really know how to hunt as well. Not to say it couldn't happen, but it's much more likely that it was a bunch of babies that got out.
So they're not going to survive.
Problem.
If they've been in captivity for a while,
not
they're
as
not really going to survive in the wild.
Not as likely, unless the stars align and they happen to find food and whatnot. But baby snakes can find food pretty quickly.
They're instinctual.
They're instinctual. They bite more. They're more defensive. They haven't learned to be handled yet. Things like that. Also, prey is much more easily eaten by a small snake than a big snake.
Okay.
Although big snakes can eat big prey, which we have in Florida as well.
Yeah.
But this is not the species in Florida. There's no boa constrictors that we know of that have become an invasive animal in Florida at all. It's Burmese pythons. And those guys are just very resilient. They're a very tough animal. It just happens to be, it's not their fault. It's actually rather sad because it's not the animal's fault at all, right? It's our
exactly.
fault.
You're just trying to survive.
So,
You're just like all of us.
But that is the species that's out there. And there's many other species. It's not just snakes.
These guys are really friendly.
They are.
Why do you think they're so friendly with humans?
I do think it's a personality thing. I think a lot of snakes do have their own very everybody's unique, obviously.
Right.
Every animal has a personality, even insects and bugs and things. But snakes, I think we kind of are good at selecting the right candidates for the job, especially ball pythons are very easy to adapt to human handling and things like that. And the ones that we have were born in captivity as well. They're definitely not from the wild. And I think ball pythons make one of the better handleable snakes. I don't necessarily think they make the best pet. They are good pets for the right human, but they are a little more advanced than some other types of snakes that are a little easier to care for.
So you talked a lot about them being pets, but then you also mentioned that that's one of your educational pillars, is helping to educate about what is a good pet and what's not a good pet. So tell us a little bit more about that.
And I don't think everybody should have pets. I think everybody should have animal experiences, but I think that it takes a certain amount of course, responsibility and education to properly care for an animal, especially one that's going to live into their 40s or 50s, like these guys.
Wow.
These guys can live a long time. That's a big commitment. And something like a tortoise that can live into their 80s or more, depending on the species, right? It also is, they're still an animal. This is not necessarily an animal to put in a tank and forget about them. I think that they deserve a lot of attention too. Maybe not as much as a dog or a bird or something like that, but they still deserve a good life.
Okay, and I always have a question. So when you talk about zoos, there's a lot of people who want to protest about animals in captivity.
That's a great topic and a very controversial topic
as
well,
so
right?
It's like you have animals and you want to see them in the wild and you want to see them in their natural habitat.
Yes, of course.
Explain to us kind of like the pros and cons of zoos and why they, why some people might be correct about them being in captivity, but also why it's important to the livelihood of the animals that are there.
Definitely. I think zoos, good zoos, of course, the ones that are taking good care of their animals and making lots of effort for either conservation, education, something, right? We're mostly based in education. We're not really like breeders or anything like that, at least not yet. Who knows what the future holds, right? Maybe we have a facility in the future. But I think that some of the main, for me, the most important aspect of a zoo is inspiring people. So if you go to a zoo, like I did when I was little, for example, SeaWorld. SeaWorld is a very controversial topic. I think it's rather silly because I grew up going to SeaWorld. I've seen it evolve and grow. I've seen the good that it can do. I worked there too. I was always behind the scenes. I never saw anything wrong with how they were caring for their animals. So when people would kind of protest or maybe they disagree, and there's nothing wrong with disagreeing, just educate yourself, I guess, or maybe get the right education, maybe talk to an expert. I think that's a better idea than educating yourself. And I think it's super important for not just kids, but anybody to go and actually go to the zoo, go to a facility, get a once in a wild experience, and see and feel and smell and all the things hands-on. And that way you actually have a good idea of what, you know what I mean? Like you have the experience. You're not just hearing from somebody about the animal. You're having the experience. Maybe you're talking to an expert zookeeper about one of my favorite animals is a babirusa. Do you know what a babirusa is?
I do not.
A babirusa is a type of pig from Sulawesi. It's an endangered species. But animals like axolotls and babirusa and pandas and things like that, they're all endangered species as well, and most people will never see them, and most of the time they don't breed well in the wild as well. So that's another aspect of conservation, is helping the species to keep on living somewhere at least, and hopefully we can take care of their home and maybe re-release some of them. There's so many things and so many aspects. Of course, it's not all perfect. Zoos are always trying to improve, at least the good ones are. We're always trying to improve as well. I think that zoos that don't improve and evolve are probably not the best places. I think that's a great aspect for any workplace, right? So definitely conservation and breeding. But for me, it's the inspiration to be able to see, touch, experience an animal up close. That's really going to help people to understand them a little bit better and maybe want to help save them, maybe actually be a zookeeper themselves one day, get into the science field. So many, the sky's the limit there. But that's my favorite thing.
and I think, especially in recent times, a lot of people were educated on the movie Blackfish. Right,
yes.
So that really went in depth. Some things that happened with one of the trainers at SeaWorld.
Yes, unfortunately.
And a very unfortunate situation.
Very unfortunately.
And then when I go and I see these orca whales, which I have seen in the wild.
Oh, super cool! I've never seen them in the wild.
Amazing! It's an incredible experience. I highly recommend it.
I bet.
And then you see them in like a fish tank, right? A glorified fish tank. How are these animals that are used to having the ocean, which is so vast, to kind of have as their home, how is it, let's say, appropriate in a way to have them in this small, confined place in the middle of Texas?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, it's not appropriate, right? But we have to be able to, I don't want to say have to, it's probably not the right thing to say, but the whales, at least that are in human care now, and the dolphins, they're either rescued out of some sort of situation to where they cannot return to the wild. Just like if you see a bird of prey that has a hurt wing or one eye or something like that, they can't return to the wild. They have to have somewhere to go. Most of the dolphins, whales, sea lions, all those animals were born in a facility. They weren't born in the wild. So they're really non-releasable as well.
Right.
Now, I know that they've discontinued their breeding program for the orcas, and that's probably for the best for now. I'm a little sad about that myself because I grew up seeing the killer whales and things like that, and it is a little sad. It's not to say it's going to be forever. Who knows? I do think that it's important for them to have somewhere to go for those aspects, maybe rescue, maybe some sort of education, some sort of experience. I do know before SeaWorld, and correct me if I'm wrong if you know, I do know before SeaWorld and before like Flipper and all of those things that those animals were not really well loved. They were actually persecuted in the wild. People thought that they were just kind of like another shark or something like that. So I think it's important to have a personable experience with some sort of animal. Now, of course, there's a fine line between what's appropriate for the animal. Is it enough space? Probably not. Are they really overcrowded in those areas? I really don't think so, in my opinion. I think the facilities they have are the best in the world at SeaWorld. I think they do the best that they can, and they can't improve without money. So if people do protest or if they boycott, that's not really helping the animals. And if we do re-release those whales, they're not going to make it.
Yeah, right. What are you going to do with them? Go put them back in the ocean?
Exactly. So they need somewhere to go, at least for now. And I think that some of the smaller cetaceans and marine mammals do need to be bred in human care for some of the reasons we just talked about. But that's a very controversial topic. But I literally worked there and would talk to people every day about this sort of thing and show them like, hey, we are doing our best.
So I know you do a lot of kids events.
We do.
And so when the kids see an animal, because I know you do have some very unique animals that we will see in just a minute.
Thank you for saying that.
How do they respond to seeing these animals?
It depends on, like, it's always fun for me to go to an event and see what the favorite animal of the day seems to be. Sometimes you get like 3 favorites, 4 favorites, whatever it may be. But especially if we do like a presentation, you'll see that like big reaction. And I tend to take it for granted, I think, because I see these animals all the time. I grew up around animals. I was very privileged that way to be able to go to the zoo all the time. We had passes to SeaWorld. I mean, I was a spoiled only child. So we went all the time. My grandparents would take us. That's what I wanted to do all the time, and I never wanted to leave. I always wanted to see everything every time, which is just my personality. But I take it for granted, whereas some people have never even seen like a rabbit in person, or they've never seen a snake. Maybe they're afraid of them, but maybe they're just like, they don't know anything yet. So some of the reactions sometimes, it's overwhelming for me to see the eyes get really big and people jump out of their seat and they go, you know, and I'm just like, oh, well, yes. But it is exciting to see that. I think some of the bigger reaction animals are the giant rabbit. That's always a big reaction animal. The bigger snake, David, he's always a big crowd pleaser, I guess. The opossum is another one that I think is super weird because we have them in our own backyards, but I guess people don't, maybe they don't see one up close or one that's friendly, or during the day, they don't see them in the light. They just look like and a lot of people have misconceptions about our local species too, like opossums. That's a whole other tangent. But the owl is another one that gets a big reaction as well. I love cats.
You want to maybe bring out some more animal friends?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. All right, Amanda. Now, what do we have here?
So you have Debbie. She's our female bearded dragon, and she actually came to us from a family who wanted to rehome her, and that happens to us quite a bit. We get calls all the time or offerings all the time for people's pets, which is another reason I like to educate people about their pets, of course, because they often will get rehomed. But bearded dragons are great. I think they're great pets for the right family, about the same level of, I would say, difficulty as the ball python. Okay. So for the right family, they make great pets.
and I'm touching him. Oh, this is Debbie.
It's girl, yeah, it's Debbie.
I'm touching her, and she has looks like a bunch of spikes, but they're soft. So what are they actually doing for her?
So those spines on the bearded dragon especially assist them when they're babies. So of course they don't start this size. That's a full-grown female. Okay. When they're little, they're quite little. When they're first hatched out of the egg, they hatch out of an egg. They're not live-born, but some lizards are, by the way. But these guys come from eggs. Their eggs are only about little bitty eggs. Okay. So they're pretty small. They're about this long when they're babies. Just a few, maybe 4 inches long. And so what they can do to deter getting eaten by a predator, and they're from Australia in the wild, by the way. So in Australia, we've got animals all over the place, right? But animals that often eat baby lizards are animals like snakes. And snakes have a hard time eating a puffy animal with spines on the side.
There you go.
They will kind of puff out their belly, and it's just a lot harder for them to swallow them if the spines are kind of stopping the process. Does that make sense? So that's one deterrent. They can also just look big and tough and look inedible. It looks spiky and scary, but it's actually very rubbery. But those little spines work in tandem together to prevent the swallowing of an animal of eating them. Birds also eat baby lizards as well. That's another animal that can kind of prevent that. Does that make sense?
So it's more like in the baby adolescent stage.
More in the babies, but there are big snakes and big birds and things that can eat an adult bearded dragon too, or a juvenile.
And who do you have there?
Oh, this is Iggy, one of our favorites. Iggy is a Peruvian guinea pig, another animal rescue actually. He's one of our rescue guinea pigs. We have 2 and then him. So 3 rescue guinea pigs out of the 6 that we have. And he's a Peruvian. So he's got the silky long hair, and he's 100% love. He's one of our absolute favorites to bring to programs and animal therapy, and he's just a little lap princess, but he is a boy.
So Iggy is native to Peru, as you said,
They are.
right?
So guinea pigs in the wild look nothing like this.
Okay.
They're a fully domesticated species. So domesticated animals are separate species from their wild counterparts, right? So like the dog. Dog is a different species than a wolf. Dogs and wolves can still interbreed, as you may know, with hybrid wolves. But some species cannot. Some are totally different. For example, rabbits. Rabbits in the wild cannot breed together with domestic rabbits. But these guys originally kind of look like a short-haired little potato rodent that lives in South America, really throughout South America, not just Peru, but kind of all over the place, as long as it's more of a savanna type area where they can run and maybe there's bushes to hide and plants to eat and things like that. They're grazers, they graze on grass. But in the wild, they're short-haired, they kind of look like a squirrel with no tail or a big hamster, and they have ears that are more pointed up and definitely not long, pretty silky hair. But this comes from, lots and lots of years of domestication and selective breeding for colors and coats, just like a dog or a cat.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But it is a separate species now. And I was mentioning earlier about some of the species going extinct in the wild compared to their domesticated cousin. These guys are an extinct species in the wild as far as the wild version. But there's other very similar species that still exist in South America. But they were domesticated by the Peruvians down in South America by the Incas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a farm animal. Wow. They would raise them for food and things like that. And then Europeans came over and thought that they were really cute and took some back to Europe and would sell them for guineas. That's where they get the name the guinea pig. So they're a matter of guineas, they're very cheap. And they would breed like crazy, and they would be able to give them to like royalty and things like that for lap pets.
So where does the pig come from?
Pig comes from their noises. They make squealing noises. So guinea pigs can make little noises. They make all sorts of different vocalizations. I think it's like 15 different determined vocalizations for guinea pigs, depending on who you ask. But they're super social. Can you hear them? He's purring, but they squeal when they get excited or afraid. They'll go wee, 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 wee.
Okay.
Just like the all the way home thing, right? So I think it reminded people of a pig. He might do it if I pick him up.
Okay.
Squeal? Maybe a little bit. He likes me though.
So you have a mammal and I have a reptile.
Indeed.
And he seems a little bit more happy to be with you. And Debbie, she seems like she could care less if I'm here or not.
I think they just have less expressions that we understand. I don't know if Debbie really minds. Guinea pigs are extremely social animals. Bearded dragons are also not social animals,
Yeah.
but they've adapted to becoming good with humans, I think. I guess we're kind of a branch and a provider of food, right, to them.
Right.
So I think they associate good things with humans. I mean, that's just my opinion. But guinea pigs live in herds. They're like little goats. They live
Okay.
in big herds together for their protection. They have almost no defense. Most rodents have a pretty powerful bite. These guys can bite if they really want to, but they've more evolved and adapted to not biting and just running. And they have a big herd. So they don't really have to be the fastest ever, just faster than like their family, right? They can just be just don't be the slowest one in the group,
There you
right?
go.
And that's their survival technique, almost like a flock of birds. But they really are completely defenseless against predators in South America, even humans. So.
And so what do you feed Debbie and what do you feed Iggy?
Good question. Iggy's a vegetarian. So in human care, if you have a pet guinea pig, which by the way makes a great pet, but they're super high maintenance. Guinea pigs are very dirty and messy and wonderful, but not for everyone. But these guys eat primarily Timothy hay. That's going to be their main diet. So it's just like a horse. If you have a horse that's a grazing animal or a goat that's a grazing animal, they're going to eat hay in human care, right? So hay is their main diet. They also get veggies as well, fresh that's hard to say, fresh veggies as well. And they get a pellet diet, which is just a little bit, it's almost like a vitamin for them. So it's like a little portioned pellet, which has their vitamin C. So vitamin C is really important for guinea pigs in particular. But these guys only sleep for 5 hours a day total, and it's in little nap increments. So they are very active, very messy. They're always pooping everywhere, peeing everywhere, and making a mess. So they're very high maintenance. But that's what they eat. They're vegetarian and grazers in the wild. A bearded dragon is actually an omnivore. So they can eat anything they want as long as it fits in their mouth. So she could eat an insect. She could eat little lizards that she finds, like little geckos and things. They can eat small rodents.
Wow.
They can eat fruits and vegetables. They can eat greens and flowers. Very adaptable, which makes them a very successful species because they can eat almost anything they want.
That's right. The outback's probably full of them.
Yes, they're everywhere, and they do vary in color and size a little bit, but they're usually kind of like Debbie. But people will see them very commonly in their own backyard or really anywhere.
So you talked about the extinction of kind of the native species, and I know that there's animals that have become extinct during our lifetime.
Definitely.
And then there's plenty of animals that are on an endangered list.
Yes, very
What
many.
are the big concerns for some of these animals, and how can we help to mitigate some of that?
That's such a long-winded question and answer.
Let's
I
see
think.
if we'll
But
do our
like
best.
some attainable things that we can do, right? I think small things in your backyard, maybe not spraying poison, maybe setting up a birdhouse or the proper hummingbird feeder for hummingbirds that are migrating, things like that to help the wildlife just be wild. And bird feeders are great as well. There's so many things we can do in our own backyard. Something called a toad abode. Have you heard about this?
I have not.
So a toad abode is, especially with the very, very hot summers and the whole planet's changing and getting really hot, right? We're losing water. We're getting way too hot for amphibians. So like toads and frogs. Toads and frogs are technically usually nocturnal. There's a few daytime amphibians, right? But most of them you'll see running around at night because they don't like the heat. They don't like the dryness of the day. So what we can do is give them a place to live during the night to hide away and actually combat the sun. So if it's too hot for them, because they'll dry out, right? You can give them a little shelter. So something as simple as like half of a flower pot, you can get a flower pot and break it in half, and you can then have 2 toad abodes. You can give them a little shelter in your garden if you have a garden. Or maybe your front yard that has plants in it. That's what they really like. They like dark, kind of muddy or dirty places that have plant cover, but they really like a little cave just to sleep in. And just giving them somewhere to be safe during the day, away from predators, away from cats, and away from the sun is going to help them survive. And we need them because they eat mosquitoes and they eat flies and all kinds of disease-spreading insects, which are great in their own right, but too many of anything is a bad thing, right? Poison is a big one for me. I always discourage people from using a ton of pesticides. Sticky traps, things like that are actually terrible for the environment. Back to cats again. That's another thing we can do, is to train or keep our cats inside. For sure, vaccinate your animals, keep them, flea prevention, things like that for your animals. What else can we talk about?
And we live here.
So many things.
We live here in Texas. Are there any species of animals here in our own backyard that are endangered?
One really famous one in Texas is the Texas horned lizard, also known as the horny toad, which is not a toad at all, it's a lizard. It actually looks similar to Debbie, but kind of like their Texas cousin, right?
Yeah.
Smaller species as well.
I've seen some in my backyard, and they have become victims to cats.
Yes, they do. That's another thing. Back to cats. They don't just eat birds, they eat all kinds of little animals. I know we're talking a lot about cats, but
we also love cats.
We do. We
want to make
love
sure
cats.
that we love cats.
I had a cat for almost 20 years, and he was my child. But I would say the Texas horned lizard is a famous one. There's many bird species that also need a lot of help, which I mentioned, helping birds. Places like the San Antonio Zoo and the Dallas Zoo actually do breeding with Texas horned lizards. So a great way to support endangered species that you love is to actually support zoos that help with breeding and conservation of those species. So for example, the axolotl. Axolotl is one of our kind of mascots for Once in a Wild. Axolotls are hard to bring on a podcast because they're in the water. They're an aquatic amphibian. But they're from Xochimilco, Mexico, which is just south of Texas. One of my favorite places in the world, Mexico, where Ricky's from as well. And Ricky's from North Mexico. But when you go down to Mexico City, there's a place called Xochimilco, which is actually kind of a tourist trap, but it's a river canal system where axolotls live. And the system has been very unhealthy for many years. So what they're doing down there is breeding the axolotls in zoos and aquariums, and then they're trying to clean up the environment. They're trying to experiment with new areas, not just Xochimilco, but like other similar habitats, to see if they can re-release some axolotls there to help the species make a comeback, because they're extremely endangered. They are critically endangered, which means almost extinct in the wild. Freshwater amphibians, or amphibians in general, are freshwater, but freshwater animals are some of the most vulnerable to becoming endangered because of the water and the quality of the water.
Right.
So that's another thing we can do, is to pick up your trash, make sure we clean up our rivers, things like that, to make sure the animals home are healthy. And we can all do our part. Recycle when you can, things like that.
So I understand that you do have some other animals for us today. Okay,
let's
take a look. Let's take a look at what else you got.
No problem. This is Sunny, and she's a cockatiel. She's actually a species also from Australia, just like Debbie. But the color is different in the wild. They're going to be more of a gray. Good girl. They're gray, and they have the yellow head in the wild and the orange cheeks in the wild. But they have a gray body and white shoulders. That's how they look as the wild type. You might have seen Evie, our other cockatiel that we have back home. So this is Sunny, though. She's got a special color. Kind of like Prince with his special color, right?
That's right. This is a beautiful bird.
Thank you. If they're in the parrot family, they are a type of parrot. They're actually a little cousin to the cockatoo. So cockatoos are like the big version, right, of the cockatiel. It's like a miniature one. They have a crest on top of their head. Parrots have a beak that is curved and very strong. This is one of the weakest bites of all the parrot kingdom. These guys have a pretty weak beak compared to larger parrots, which you may have seen, like a macaw or a cockatoo, something like that. And then parrots actually have really special toes as well. Their toes are zygodactyl, which means they have 2 toes pointing in the front and 2 toes in the back. Most birds have 3 and 1. So most birds have 4 toes, but it's 3 and 1 in the back, like one little hook toe in the back, and then these guys have 2 and 2. That gives them a more even grip.
So I noticed that, you say she or he?
It's a girl.
Okay.
Good question.
So I noticed that she's eating seeds right now.
She is.
In the wild, what is her diet like?
Their diet actually is primarily seeds in the wild. So in the wild, cockatiel is going to be very widespread. They're kind of a savanna bird, so you'll see them out in grasslands and in the trees as well, of course. And the trees is where they are most safe. But they'll go down to the ground and eat seeds as well, and they'll eat all kinds of vegetables, and they'll eat seeds from trees as well. So seeds is going to be their main diet in the wild. In human care, I don't recommend seeds only. Seeds only can make them very chunky and make them unhealthy. They can give them heart disease and stuff like that, because they're not exercising as much as they would in the wild. So in the wild, they're flying around all the time. There, she got me already. They're flying around all the time in the wild, so they're exercising their body and keeping their heart healthy. in human care, there's a better diet for them. It's a pellet diet and vegetables as well. But this is a treat for her. When parrots eat, they're gonna miss a lot of these seeds, especially in the trees. Think about like a parrot in the Amazon. They're gonna be eating a lot of plants from the trees, like seeds and fruit, and they're gonna drop a lot of it. So that helps the seed dispersal. So they're gonna be planting plants and trees wherever they go. They're very messy for a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
They're serving many purposes for the wild.
Yeah, so many purposes. They're prey as well for other animals.
Yeah, so what kind of animals are they prey for?
All kinds of animals. This is a very small animal, so animals like foxes will eat them. Animals like, and I say foxes, but foxes are actually an invasive species to Australia, now that I think about it. But foxes will eat them, cats will eat them too. Certainly snakes and lizards will eat them, but their main predator is going to be the bird of prey. So any type of bird of prey, especially during the day, because this is a daytime animal. I can't really think of any parrot that's a nocturnal species. I think there's maybe one or two that are a little weird, but most parrots all over the world are diurnal, they're daytime. So their main predators of all the parrots are other birds of prey. That's going to be their main predator because they're flying and so are birds of prey, right? So that's an easy animal to catch for like a falcon or something like that, falcons and hawks. But all kinds of animals eat little birds.
Right.
Yes, so their main defense is similar to the guinea pig. Guinea pigs live in groups and so do little cockatiels. They live in flocks together with their family. And they don't have to be the fastest in the world, just faster than their friends, right? Now, my favorite thing about parrots is they're monogamous. They're monogamous birds. Not all birds are truly monogamous. Some are just seasonally monogamous. Some are whatever they want, and no one's gonna judge them, right? It's okay.
So you talk a lot about these animals coming from Australia or South America. How did they get here, and what is the process like when dealing with the animal trade, diseases, different things that can be communicated? Like, just tell us a little bit more about what's happening.
It's one of those things that's definitely getting better in society. Just in the last 20 years, it's gotten a lot better because of new laws and things like that. But all of those laws and all of those rules have to be enforced as well. So I think a lot of it has to do with enforcement of those things. Cockatiels, for example, it's a good example because we have one here. Cockatiels are very, very easy to breed in captivity. So that has to do with their demand for wild cockatiels. There's no reason to get wild cockatiels anymore. Right. And now they're protected, which is a good thing. Now, luckily, they're not an endangered species. They're very successful in the wild as well because they're widespread. They do great in their flocks together for a bunch of reasons, right? They're very successful, which is a good thing. Not all parrots are like that. Most parrots, say in the Amazon, those guys are not doing well at all because their habitat is not doing well. Australia has a lot more regulations on their local species because they really care. Australia is a really good example of how we should be doing things, to be honest. But there's so many issues with importation of animals. Number one being the danger to the animal. It's not safe. They have to, if it's illegal, especially, they have to hide them. They have to cram them into tiny spaces.
Right.
They have to make a very long trip, which is super stressful for any wild animal, especially even a captive animal. That's very, very stressful. It can be sometimes. And we really don't move animals overseas unless we have to, right? In like the zoo world. But these guys that are imported, they just kind of do it in bulk. It's like it's a product. It's not really, they don't really care. But unfortunately, it has to do with a human issue as well, and that's money to feed their families and stuff like that. So most people that are helping with poaching and importation of wildlife, they're not the problem. It's the people that are in charge is the problem. It's where the money comes from. So there's a lot of improvement to be made. It has gotten a lot better though. There's a lot more laws, a lot more eyes on things because of cameras and things like that. So it's a lot harder to get away with illegal animal importation, which is great. But I think where the root of it too, one of the roots anyway, is figuring out how to breed these animals in human care. So, and that's something that's really, really been successful with cockatiels. Axolotls is another one. There's no reason to import, and if you tried to import an axolotl, they would probably snipe you. They're super protected in Mexico. But if we know how to successfully breed them for the demand, then there's no reason to bring them in. So I think that's honestly where it kind of lies as a solution, and that's why I'm not really against exotic pets to a degree. I think that they don't make good pets for everybody. I think that some should be focused on and some should be not focused on. But in zoos, for example, even if you think about say the owner of a zoo or somebody in charge, they really want a certain animal to draw the public, right? If they need one from the wild, they're probably going to figure out a way to do that. And that's what they used to do. For example, with giraffes, they would just take them out of the wild and bring them to wherever zoo they are. Now we know how to breed giraffes. So there's no reason to bring them out of the wild. Does that make sense?
It does.
So, and it applies to really anything. Could be the pet trade, could be farming, could be the zoo as well. And so many other places.
And what happens when an authority does come across an animal that has been illegally imported?
If someone here in San Antonio heard about somebody that had a pet tiger in their suburban neighborhood, and it's obviously illegal because it's very, very dangerous and also inappropriate to have them as pets, right? It's better for the tiger to be at an appropriate facility. If that happened, they would for sure be seized, but I'm not sure what would happen from there. It depends on, how much room we have in wherever zoo. I do know personally some of the staff on board with Animal Care Services here in San Antonio, and they are very good about trying to find animals home whenever they can. We've actually gotten calls before, not about tigers, but other smaller animals to see if we would like to adopt. And we do sometimes.
Yeah. What's some of the more peculiar animals that you've gotten calls about for adoption?
I definitely got calls about monkeys. A lot of people, and reptiles. Reptiles, since we kind of specialize in some of the reptiles, right? We are kind of famous for knowing how to take care of reptiles. So we do get a lot of calls for like lizards and a tegu, an iguana, things like that. I only have so much space, but I can definitely help people find homes through my network. But I've gotten calls for monkeys. I've gotten calls for definitely pigs, things like that, which pigs aren't super exotic or anything like that, especially domestic pigs. But monkeys is probably the weirdest one, and I have said absolutely not. I'm not a monkey fan, at least for what I do.
Okay, so I understand that you have one more big, beautiful animal to show us.
We do. Would you like to see him?
Yeah, let's see him. And then who are we about to see?
Who indeed? We shall find out. You better get lost.
Yeah, he's excited too. Now, who do we have here?
This is Rango. He's our owl, of course. He's our one and only owl right now, but I have worked with owls before. Different types of owls, but he's my favorite species, the Eurasian eagle owl.
Eurasian eagle owl. So
Correct.
Eurasian. What exactly does that mean?
So Europe, Asia, and even North Africa too.
So all over those places.
All
That's
over
why
those
it's Eurasian.
places.
Okay.
They're very widespread, and they're very
Excellent.
adaptable to all sorts of weather as well. So cold is their favorite. They love the cold, so you'll
Okay.
see them really commonly in Europe and Russia and places
Okay.
like that. But you'll see some of them as well in North Africa. But it gets cold there too sometimes.
Right. If they love the cold, how's he doing in the weather here in Texas?
He does all right. He's actually an animal that was bred in Colorado, and he was raised in Kansas. Kansas has pretty similar weather to at least parts of Texas. We have a super hot summer. Owls are very insulated though, so they do well in all seasons, hot or cold, but his favorite is just the cold. He prefers the cold, like some people, right? But he does okay. We give him lots of water, we give him breaks indoors and things like that, but their body really does a good job of adapting to the weather.
Okay.
That's what they naturally would do in the wild. And he's been outside his whole life, which is best for them to adapt that way.
So Rango is a big, beautiful bird,
He is.
and we love him. He's the showstopper, right? He comes out right at the end of the show.
Yes. Yeah, we usually bring him out as kind of either the last or middle animal in the presentation.
And so I know that Rango
Usually.
stays in kind of like a big enclosure.
He does.
Doesn't he want to fly around? Is he prevented from being able to do a natural flying pattern or whatever owls normally would do during the day or at
Yeah.
night when they're more active?
That's a good question. He's definitely more active at night. He's also an imprinted bird, though. He's been used to human care his whole life, and his enclosure size that we have is actually larger than what he had previously, I believe, and certainly larger than when he was a baby. So he's got a lot of space to fly around back and forth. Owls are actually pretty lazy animals overall. I'm talking about most owls. Most of your classic owls that look like this, they really kind of park in a tree most of the time. So they don't need a ton of space to migrate or fly high speeds or anything like that. Some of the exceptions are animals like barn owls. Barn owls are a lot more active during the nighttime. They're nocturnal as well. But barn owls are more field hunters, so they like to fly a little bit more, and they're more of a flighty owl. Eurasian eagle owls have almost no natural predators because they're so large and they're so specialized to what they do. A Eurasian eagle owl female is twice as big as him. So you can imagine
wow.
how large of an owl that is in their natural environment. They really don't have that many animals that they have to worry about. And they are just kind of an animal that just hangs out. They don't have very many worries at all. So he's not a super active bird is what I'm trying to say. Owls are also not the smartest birds. Did you know that?
I did not know that. They always say the wise old owl.
Yes,
Where does that come from?
That comes from their age. So the wise old owl comes from the fact that they can live into their 60s. That is a very long-lived bird,
Yeah.
especially for people to see year after year, because owls don't migrate. They usually pick a territory and stay in their territory their whole life. They'll have babies usually once a year. They'll try to find their original mate once a year and have babies together. And they actually take 6 months apart. They're seasonally monogamous. So they'll find each other, try to raise babies together, and then separate again and have some me time. But usually people that would observe owls in ye olden days, they would see the same ones year after year, and they're like, oh my gosh, they must be so wise, you know. But it's really just they're living a long time. So that's really where that comes from. That's not actually super common to say in other countries other than the United States. The United States is where we really think of owls as like a reverent, wise animal. Other countries, it's not really the case. Just like some countries really revere snakes. They think that snakes are wise and kind of more noble, and we kind of fear snakes, which is kind of silly. But it just depends on your culture, I guess. There's lots of misunderstandings about owls, but most people do like them. So they are an animal that most of the time people get a very positive reaction, which is fantastic.
So when you say that the owl's not the smartest bird, what exactly do you mean that's not the smartest bird?
So when we talk about smart, that's really human opinion, right?
Yeah.
We're not really, I mean, what is smart? You know, it's philosophy, right? We could get really deep here. But we're talking about problem solving and maybe needing a lot to do, a lot of activity, things like that. Owls really don't need much of that at all. They're very simple animals. They do what they do, very specialized to hunting at night, seeing at night, being a silent flyer to be able to catch prey very successfully as well. These guys have to hunt every night, just like a cat hunts every day or night, right? Yeah. Daily. These guys also need to hunt daily because they're warm-blooded. So they really need to find food every single night. They're very successful hunters, which is not super common in the animal kingdom. Most animals that are hunters will have a very low success rate. Owls have a very high success rate. But that's not because of their brain. It's because of their specialties. They have amazing vision. They can see very long distance and see very well in the dark. He can see in the day as well. He sees very well right now. So anytime. They have almost no sense of smell that we know of, but they do have amazing hearing. Their hearing is just as good as their eyesight. So they use their eyes and their ears as a specialty to hunt. But how they do hunt is first with their vision. They can actually see 100 yards away and still see sharply. So if you were to hold a penny 100 yards away from him, he could read the fine print on the penny and see the little details on like Lincoln's head and stuff like that. And he can hear with his crooked ears. He's got a flat head, flat face, right? Kind of like a human face. Most birds have a long nose, right? Yeah. He's got a very flat nose. So that's actually with the purpose too. It's like a satellite dish on front of his head. So that's gonna all funnel sound towards his ears. And his ears are not here, like we mentioned, right? Those aren't the ears. Those right here, they're just feathers. A little wink at us, or a blink. They actually have really big eyelids, don't they? And a third eyelid.
Huge eyes.
Swiping third eyelid. But they have feathered eyelids, so their eyes almost look like they're wearing makeup and eyelashes. But their ears are actually here and way down here. So he's got crooked ears.
Oh, so like below his kind of
One is here and one is way down here. And it's even pointed in different directions a little bit as well. That gives them the ability to triangulate sound. So when an owl has a flat face like a satellite dish that funnels sound, they can actually kind of move their head around like this and narrow down by elimination where sounds are coming
Is that what they're doing when they're moving their heads?
Yes. Okay. Have you ever seen, there's a video of a barn owl that's like kind of bobbing to the music. Have you seen that before?
I have not. But...
So look it up. There's actually a really cute and educational video. I think it's a really cool educational opportunity. There's a barn owl in a church, and the people are actually not happy that the barn owl is there because they maybe think it's a ghost or a witch or something like that. So they're playing music to scare away or ward away the witch. And the owl is just like dancing to the music, but they're really just trying to figure out what they're listening to, right? So they're curious about it. But they especially use that when they're hunting. It's kind of like this really cool neck motion that they do. And their neck is very long. Did you know their neck is long?
I did not know that.
So it looks short. It looks like he has no neck and wide shoulders, but that's because of...
Oh, there he goes. He lifted it up
there. That's a nice little hoot. That's the most common noise that this species makes. Not all owls hoot, but he does. But he's got very, very fluffy neck feathers. So that covers his neck. But we only have 7 vertebrae in our neck. These guys have 14.
Wow.
So they have actually quite a long neck for their size and a very small skull. Their skull is about the size of a tennis ball. His eyes are huge. They don't move.
Interesting.
So he does have to have the flexibility in the neck, not just to figure out where noises are, but also to look around. He cannot turn his eyes. His eyes are way too big to move.
So his eyes don't move?
They do not.
So is that the reason they can turn their heads around?
Yes,
so
that's
far?
one reason.
Okay, so why can they do that? That's pretty incredible that they're able to move.
The rotation is double what we have, since they have more neck bones than we have.
Because of the neck bones.
And if you think about it, all birds have a flexible neck. Even the cockatiel, she can turn her head backwards
That's
too.
true.
It's just not as weird looking as it is with an owl. So I think owls, they get that like little exorcist move, that people remember, because it looks like the head is just rotating. But it's really just that they have a longer neck than it looks like. Like a chicken has a long neck.
That's
as well.
true. That's true. And when you're telling me about how they can see such minute details in, for instance, a penny, as you said.
Yes, they can.
How do we know what the owl can see?
The owl is more based on seeing in the night, so they need more of the rods in their eyes, the rod cells, and the cones for color. They don't really need color vision. They still see some color. It's not colorblind, but it's a lot less than most birds, and most birds can actually see it more of a color spectrum than most animals. So birds see colors that we don't even know about. For most birds, not this one. Owls know, but most birds can't. So for a bird, he's got very limited color vision, but the distance is, and the night vision is what he specializes in. But I'm not sure. I'm not the one that discovered this. I'm always learning all the time, which is part of the job too.
So Rango, what is in captivity? Because I imagine in the wild he's eating rodents and maybe snakes and different things like that. What is he eating in captivity?
In the wild, they can eat whatever they want. He only weighs about 4 pounds, 4 to 5 pounds as a male. Females are twice as big, so they can weigh up to 10. But female Eurasian eagle owls can hunt something up to 40 pounds. So whatever they want, as long as it's 40 pounds and under. They don't necessarily eat the whole animal, but they would leave a lot of leftovers for other scavengers to come and eat. A lot of predators that need to get through the winter. That's actually a super important, what's the word? Something that they provide for other animals that wouldn't make it through the winter otherwise. Some animals migrate, some animals hibernate, and some are just out all seasons. These guys in human care, they'll eat whatever meat is in front of them. So he eats about 100 grams of meat every single night. That's when we feed him, is usually at sunset, and he prefers to eat then. He gets anything from chicken to rats to quail to a little bit of beef. He likes beef heart especially. Cow tongue is another thing he really likes, but we cut it up for him and measure it for him.
Okay. Okay, so but is he feeling the need to have to hunt at
Gotcha.
all?
He has in the past. He has caught a couple of slow-moving animals in the past. So he's caught like a young opossum. We actually saw him catch. I saw the remains of him, what he had eaten from the opossum. He ate part of the opossum and left the rest for me to discover the next day,
So it kind
which
of
was
just
great.
like wandered into his
Yes, I think it was just like, oh, there it is. I might as well get it. And opossums are not fast.
Okay.
So, and of course, owls are not fast either. Owls are pretty slow flyers, but they're quiet. So if they're out in the wild, they can really hunt in open areas and things like that very silently and be sneaky about it. But it's really going to depend on if an animal wanders in. And I believe he got a rat before as well, but that's it. Not a ton that I know of.
And where did you acquire Rango? How did you?
Rango came from another raptor center, or a raptor center. I shouldn't have said another.
What's a raptor center?
So Rango came from a raptor center up north in Kansas.
Okay.
In the Wichita area. And their main focus of that center is to rehab animals. So they're more of a rehabilitation center for anything from eagles to vultures to owls, birds of prey in general. And at the time, they were doing education programs as well, and that's why they adopted Rango as a imprinted, hand-raised zoo bird from Colorado, where he was born. And I believe they purchased him from a breeder at the time as an educational animal ambassador, because he's great on glove and a great animal to take around. But the gentleman that owns the Raptor Center, unfortunately, was in a car accident, and he's older, and he kind of discontinued the programs going off-site since the car accident and since 2020. So he was just looking to rehome Rango to another more of an appropriate home that's actually going to be able to utilize Rango's skills. And Rango's only 9 years old. They can live to be 60 or more. So he's got a lot of years ahead of him. So he knew he should probably go to another educational program. Owls are like give and take. They're like, it's almost like a cat, really. If you're here, I'm fine with it. But if you're not, I'm okay to be alone as well. So they're actually pretty simple as far as a zoo animal to care for. That being said, they're very specialized. So we have to know how to care for him. Properly feed him and take care of him. Take him to the vet when he needs. Weigh him when he needs to be weighed. But he sees a lot of different, of course, different places and things with his work as well, because he's a working owl. So he gets to get out and about and see all kinds of different places.
Yeah, he gets a lot of stimulation, more than he normally would.
He does. But most birds need a lot more. Most birds are very, very difficult to keep happy. An owl is a pretty simple creature. So. Wow.
So we talked a lot about conservation. We talked about education. Amanda, what's your message to the world? What do you want for people to know about animals and about animals in captivity, pets? What is it that you would like for us to know?
That's a really good question. There's so much to do and so much to teach all ages on animals, about humans. I think all humans can benefit from animals for sure. I don't think that means taking them into your own home necessarily, but sometimes that can be a benefit to some humans, right? Our mission is to inspire others to make a difference through live animal experiences. And that could be anything from listening to me talk all about the animal facts, answering questions. That could be something as simple as petting a rabbit and helping your day to be better and putting a smile on your face. And maybe you like rabbits now and you want to save rabbits all over the world. I don't know. Maybe you want to run a rescue for rabbits. That could be anything, right? Or maybe changing your mind about misunderstood animals such as snakes and spiders and scorpions and things like that. It could be anything, but we really hope to make some sort of difference in our community and really all over the place. Maybe we can bring a positive animal message to the world. For animals in captive care, I think it really depends on the facility. I would definitely visit your local zoo and support your local zoo, but make sure to support the right places that have animals. So, and how do you know what's what? Well, you can probably tell by the animal care, maybe some research, maybe reviews on the different places, or the very best way is to talk to an expert. I think the best way is to ask an expert which facilities you should support and whatnot. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was amazing. Well, we really appreciate you coming out today, and we had a lot of fun seeing these animals. It's not something that we get to see every day, obviously. I mean, it's not every day I get to see an owl in person, and I love owls so much. Actually, as I get older, I find myself just being more intrigued by birds for some reason.
Oh, very cool.
I'm not really sure what that is. I'm kind of developing into a birder. But owls, I just love them so much. They're so beautiful. And we really just appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And
Thank you.
We wish you well in once in a while's growth, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been a lot of fun. Right, Ringo?